بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today's topic, we discussed in our previous lectures, we discussed the coming down of the Mahdi, we discussed the concept of Dajjal, we discussed the coming down of Isa to a great extent. But I feel that there was one topic that is interspersed in all of this. I referenced it many times, but I never really gave a dedicated lecture to it. So I felt that in fact it deserves an entire lecture about the signs of Judgment Day. And that is the wars or the fighting or the Armageddon or the great battle that will take place. So I referenced this a number of times. There are many traditions that mention warfare towards the end of times. And the fact of the matter is that these traditions, although numerous, they are cryptic as usual because we don't have a chronology. We don't have all of these ahadith talking about one war or many small wars or wars that go over many decades or many centuries. We don't know. It's simply predictions of Judgment Day. And there are some wars that some ahadith that simply say of the signs of Judgment Day is qital, there will be warfare. And the Prophet predicted you will have days of haraj. They said, what is haraj? He said, bloodshed. So there are predictions of lots of wars. Now, does this mean the time of the Sahaba, the civil war, all the way throughout Islamic history where the Muslims are fighting, or we are talking about only one time frame? This is where there's no clear-cut answer, and Allah knows best. So today's lecture will be somewhat, a lot of it is my own ijtihad in terms of piecing together. Obviously the ahadith I'm quoting you are ahadith, there's no ijtihad there, but trying to find a chronology, trying to make sense out of all of these ahadith, it's human ijtihad. And Allah knows best, it is my reading, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best, that these ahadith predict firstly a continuation of wars from the time of the Sahaba up until Judgment Day, or to be more precise, up until the Great War. But secondly, there are a number of ahadith that mention civil war between the Muslims towards the end of times. A massive war that will take place between the Muslims. And also, there's a series of ahadith that mention a big war between Muslims and an ally and a non-Muslim. So Muslims with one group of non-Muslims versus another group of non-Muslims. And also, this is genre number 2. And then genre number 3, there are ahadith about the big war. In Arabic it is called al-malhamatul kubra. This is a prophetic term. Al-malhama. Malhama means the disaster, the catastrophe, or the bloodshed. Malhama, just the bloodshed. And this is the equivalent of the Christian concept of the Armageddon. So there are a number of ahadith that mention a civil war. That's not the Armageddon. That's before the Armageddon. Then there are hadith that mention a big war, but not quite the big war. So there will be a big war, but not the big war. And this is all ijtihad because some ulama have merged them all together. And then there are hadith that mention the big war. And of course, the big war, the malhama, is between Isa and Dajjal. That is the end, the final battle that will take place. After that, there might not be any more wars. After that, as we're going to come to later on, that might be the end of all wars, and then other things will happen after that. So, Allah knows best. This seems to be the in a nutshell what we are talking about. Once again, first and foremost, a series of continual battles, mini battles. The Prophet ﷺ predicted, once the sword is unsheathed from my ummah, it will never be put back. This is a generic hadith. The Muslims will be continually fighting petty battles. From the time of the Sahaba, major battles took place, Battle of Siffin, Battle of Jamal, continuation throughout Islamic history. Muslims have been fighting one another. You look at right now what's happening, Muslims are fighting one another, right? This is standard, it's going to happen. Then there will come a time where there will be major wars between the Muslims. And there will come a time there will be a major war between Muslim and non-Muslim on one side and one other non-Muslim on the other. Now, whether this is going to be before and after the big major war between Muslims, we don't know. And then it will conclude with what? With the big war, the Malhamatul Kubra. So today, inshallah ta'ala, let's discuss some of those traditions and get a clear understanding of what this notion is. We begin with the famous hadith in Sahih, in the Tarikh of Ibn Asakir, which is oft quoted many times. It is an authentic hadith where Abdullah ibn Hawala said, we were with the Prophet ﷺ and we complained to him how poor we were and that we didn't even have clothes to wear. We're complaining to him. So the Prophet ﷺ said, rejoice, don't worry about that. For I am not worried that you will live in poverty. La wallah, I'm not worried that you're going to live in poverty. Wallahi, this ummah will be in continual good until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up the lands of the Faris, the Persians, and the lands of the Romans, that's the Byzantine Empire, and the lands of Himyar, that is Yemen. So in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ predicted, don't worry, we will conquer the Persian Empire, and that happened. And we will conquer the Byzantine Empire, and that happened. Jazakallah khair. And we will conquer Yemen, and all of that happened. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, you will become 3 armies. So he said, you will become. This is the ummah. This is the civil war we talked about between the Muslims. You will become 3 armies. Jund bil Sham, wa Jund bil Iraq, wa Jund bil Yemen. An army will be in Sham, an army will be in Iraq, and an army will be in Yemen. And wealth will be so much that a man will be given 100 dinars. Now 100 dinars, maybe if I were to say in our times like $5,000. It's a large amount, but not an obscenely large amount. 5,000 is no joke. 100 dinars is a good amount of money, right? A person will be given 100 dinars and think, this is nothing. This is not a good amount. In other words, wealth will be so much that a good amount of wealth would be considered utterly trivial. Ibn Hawala said, Ya Rasulullah, when that happens, which of these 3 armies should I be with? Which of these 3 armies should I be with? The Prophet ﷺ said, I tell you to be in the army of Sham, of Syria, because it is the chosen of Allah's people, and it is where the Qiyamah will take place. So the Prophet ﷺ predicted that there will be 3 armies, an army in Sham, an army in Iraq, and an army in Yemen. And he told Ibn Hawala, choose the army in Yemen. I already mentioned, in Sham. I already mentioned another hadith that I mentioned right before going for Hajj. We mentioned that when I mentioned the concept of the Mahdi. We went over this hadith quickly. It is in the 6 books, the authentic hadith, Sunan Ibn Majah, where our Prophet ﷺ said, this is about the Mahdi. We jumped to the Mahdi part. There was a phrase there I glossed over, and that is, يَقْتَتِلُ عِنْدَ كَنْزِكُمْ ثَلَاث كُلُّهُمْ إِبْنَ خَلِيفَةٍ. 3 sons of a Khalifa will fight amongst you at your treasures, for your treasures. What treasure is this? Some have said this is the treasure in Mecca. There was a treasure buried once upon a time. But the hadith doesn't mention Mecca, and it is my opinion, it doesn't make sense to interpret it as Mecca. Rather, there will be a treasure of the ummah. Oil, natural resource, Allah knows best. There will be a treasure belonging to the ummah. And 3 sons of a Khalifa, 3 princes. All of their fathers are royal family. All of their fathers are ruling. So 3 sons of a Khalifa will fight one another. So these are within the ummah. This is the internal civil war that we talked about. And none of them will be victorious. They're all 3 going to fail. None of them will be victorious. And then the black flags will come from Khurasan, and then the Mahdi, and then the hadith goes on. So we jump to the Mahdi, but where does it begin? There will be an internal civil war. And what this hadith shows is that the Mahdi will come at a time when the Muslim ummah itself is internally fighting. And the Mahdi will unify the ummah from within. This is pretty clear, that the Mahdi will unify the ummah. The ummah will need a leader. The ummah will need somebody they can trust, somebody whose integrity is beyond doubt, and the person that they will look to and the person they will unanimously go behind is none other than the Mahdi. So there will be massive civil war, but the Mahdi comes and that civil war will be finished, because how can now you fight when the Mahdi is there? So this is a very clear indication that there shall be a time of massive internal civil war between the ummah And frankly, when you look at what is happening now with the internal superpowers, and I don't like mentioning names, but you use your common sense and knowledge of politics. Right now, there's already massive wars going on. Right now, Muslims are dividing amongst themselves, each one of them doing its own, and Muslims are being harmed in the process. Allahul Musta'an. What's even worse, by the way, is that these are being used by non-Muslims, right? The problem comes, the superpowers of the world are using their proxies in these regions. Each one of them thinks that they will be the lapdog of the big superpower. In reality, the superpowers never care about their lapdogs. In any case, I go into my tangents here. What I'm saying, we should be slightly terrified. No, we should be very terrified, looking at what is happening in the world and looking at these ahadith about the end of times, and Allah knows best. So this is the issue of the internal war. Let us now move on to other wars that are predicted. One hadith mentions that one of the tabi'un was in Kufa, and Kufa was the land of Ibn Mas'ud. Ibn Mas'ud established his madrasa in Kufa. The greatest sahabi of Kufa was Ibn Mas'ud, and he died in Kufa as well. So Ibn Mas'ud was in Kufa, and one of these tabi'in, his name is Usayd ibn Jabir, he said, one day it was very cloudy and a dark storm, a dust storm came in the daytime, blocked the sun, and it seemed very terrifying. So a man came shouting to the masjid, "Oh Ibn Mas'ud, oh Ibn Mas'ud, the day of judgment is coming." Looking at what is happening, he became terrified. He's running to Ibn Mas'ud saying, "Look, this is Qiyamah coming." Ibn Mas'ud then stood up amongst the people. The people are looking to him for comfort, for wisdom. The people are terrified. They're gathered in the masjid. Ibn Mas'ud stood up and he said, "The Qiyamah will not come until..." And then he gave a series of predictions. Now, important point before I move on. Whenever a sahabi, listen to this as a rule, whenever a companion mentions something about ilm al-ghayb, automatically what he says becomes a hadith. This is a rule. Whenever a sahabi says something about the knowledge of the unseen, if a sahabi says that, oh, the righteous person will be given a white palace in Jannah that has gardens, if a sahabi speaks of Jannah, if a sahabi speaks of judgment day, on the day of judgment such and such will happen, if a sahabi speaks about the signs of the judgment day, automatically that statement gets a free upgrade, goes to first class, right? Free upgrade. What is the upgrade? It becomes a hadith. Why? Because how could a sahabi speak about ilm al-ghayb unless he heard it from the Prophet ﷺ? Now, if a sahabi says something is haram or halal, this remains the opinion of a sahabi. Because haram and halal is ijtihad. Haram and halal, you have the right for ijtihad. And the Sahaba differed about haram and halal, like all of these great scholars did. If this is haram, this is halal, the Sahaba differed. They have the right for ijtihad. Their ijtihad has a high level, but it doesn't become Quran and Sunnah. But when a Sahabi speaks about Allah Azza wa Jal, His names and attributes, the judgment, the signs of judgment, automatically it gets a free upgrade. In this hadith, the hadith begins as a statement of Ibn Mas'ud, then in the middle, automatically Ibn Mas'ud says, and then the Prophet said. So we even prove the rule through this hadith, that he's narrating what the Prophet said, and then in the middle of the hadith, he subconsciously says, and then the Prophet said. The hadith does not begin in the middle where he says, and then the Prophet said. It begins from the beginning because it talks about the knowledge of the unseen. So go back to the hadith. It's an interesting hadith. Ibn Mas'ud stood up. By the way, this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, I forgot to mention, and it's a long hadith. Ibn Mas'ud stood up and he said, the Qiyamah is not going to come until you see these signs. And these signs haven't come, so this cannot be the Qiyamah. Number one, he said, people will not be able to divide their inheritance. This means massacres and death will be so profound that a person will have no family left. And people will not be happy over ghanima, war booty. Once again, means there's no family. And this is explicitly mentioned, we'll talk about that. Then he pointed towards Asham, Syria. He is in Iraq. He points towards the land that is known as Sham. And he said, and an enemy will gather forces against the Muslims, and the Muslims will gather forces against them. A man in the audience said, do you mean Ar-Rum, the Romans? He said, yes. Now the Romans refers to European civilization, the Christian empires. And there's no problem extrapolating the concept of Romans to the modern nations that look up to that empire as being their, if not biological, their theological and their intellectual ancestors. We all know, went over this as well. So the term Rome, can de facto apply to the majority civilization, the superpowers of our times. So, and by the way, this is interesting because again, these are predictions that we are now seeing taking place. So, Ibn Mas'ud said, yes, I mean the Romans. And at that time, there will be a severe fighting, a fierce fighting. The Muslims will send a battalion to fight to death, and they will not return. They will die. They will fight until night. Neither side will be victorious over the other. On the second day, the Muslims will send another battalion, and they will fight to death, and they will not return victorious. On the third day, the same thing will happen. And then on the fourth day, so for 3 days, Muslims are going in, and it is going to be massacre after massacre. Nobody will remain alive from the first batches that go. On the fourth day, Allah Azza wa Jal will grant victory to the Muslims, and the enemy will be defeated. So there will be 4 days of battle somewhere in Bilad al-Sham. Now, is this the great Armageddon, or is this the precursor to the Armageddon? This is not the great Armageddon, it looks like. This is the precursor. This is a massive war that will take place before the Armageddon. Now the hadith goes on, and this is from the statement. This will be a battle the likes of which have never seen before. This is very terrifying. In human history, no battle has taken place that is more terrifying and more severe than that battle that will take place towards the end of times. And then Ibn Mas'ud said, and this is so powerful, and it's not Ibn Mas'ud, it is from the Prophet ﷺ, so much so that a bird that will fly over them will fall down dead. Now, you tell me, before I move on, you tell me, no matter how many people are killed by the swords on this land, will it affect a bird in the heavens? No. What will affect a bird in the heavens? Not swords. Get the point. Not swords. Something's going to happen that a bird in the heavens will be flying over, it will come down dead. And then the hadith goes on. Out of a family of 199 will perish and 1 will survive. The attrition rate in this war, 99%. Allahul Musta'an. What war in human history has had 99% death? None. I don't know of any. 99%. The victory was given to the 1%. 99%. And this is when the Prophet said, Ibn Mas'ud said, so how can anyone be happy over ghanima or any inheritance be divided? In other words, may Allah protect all of us. If somebody were to give you $1 million but you have no family, wallahi, what sane person will choose that? Family is worth more than this whole dunya. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, how can anybody be happy when he gets all the ghanima and 99 of his family had that? He's nobody left, no parents, no children, nothing left. How can anybody be happy? What is the point of that ghanima? It's all gone. How will inheritance be divided when there will be no family left? So this war will destroy 99% of those fighting in it. While they are doing this, and they are finishing the battle, collecting the ghanima, recovering, they will hear there's a bigger calamity than this war. What could be a bigger calamity? Somebody will shout out, the Dajjal has come where your families have been left behind. So in that state, tired, bruised, bleeding, but their families are being attacked, whoever is remaining in the land that they left behind, Bilad al-Sham, wherever there is, they will run, they will rush back to that land, and they will discover that it is a lie. It is not true. And in one hadith it is mentioned that they will send their 10 best horsemen to go verify that news. The 10 fastest horsemen. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, I know their names and the names of their forefathers and the colors of their horsemen, the colors of their horses, and they will be the best horsemen on the face of this earth. Now, does this mean we will go back to horses and swords? If there is that type of war, in all likelihood we will. If there is that type of war, when nuclear weapons and whatnot and every side and whatnot, then we will go back to those days when there was no electricity and whatnot. We're going to go back to this. Or is it possible that when the Prophet is saying horse, he means a vehicle? This is also possible. It's not too much of a stretch, and Allah knows best. So this hadith mentions. Now, does this hadith mention the Mahdi? Yes or no? Where? But does this hadith mention the Mahdi? No, it does not. But other ahadith mention that the Mahdi will be the one that will be there when the news comes that the Dajjal is around. So it appears that this big war that is being referenced is a war that the Mahdi will participate in, even though he's not mentioned in this one, right? So it is a war between Ar-Rum and between the Muslims. It is a massive war. Now, many have said this hadith is a reference to the Armageddon. And it could be true. Because here's the point. Is the Armageddon one battle or is it a series of battles? It goes back. If it's only one battle, then in all likelihood that will be Dajjal and Isa ibn Maryam. But if it is a series of major battles, then it makes sense that this hadith in fact is one of those big battles of the Armageddon. Allah knows best. The next hadith we'll mention, which is a very cryptic one, and it has been used by the terrorist group known as the Islamic State as their basis. We don't agree with this group, and I have very publicly criticized them, and all you need to do is look at how much damage they have done a lot of times. And by the way, I gave many lectures about this. Obviously I'm new to the community still, but you will know inshallah when we go on. SubhanAllah, look at what the Prophet said about the Kharijites, the Khawarij. He said, their speech is beautiful, but their actions are deadly. Their speech sounds good. It is sweet, but what they do is evil. And this is exactly what these groups, all of them. If you just listen to snippets, oh, we will re-establish Allah's command and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Then you look at what they do and the number of Muslims that they have killed and their tactics and you realize these are exactly the Khawarij, like the Prophet ﷺ said. Read the descriptions of the Kharijites. Look at what they did to the Sahaba. Look at their philosophy and attitude. And wallahi, you will see all of these groups. They might speak that which sounds like honey, but in reality, their harm is much worse than even the harm that non-Muslims do. And this is the reality that we see with our own eyes. So this group known as the so-called Islamic State, which is now on its last legs and it will inshallah be completely eliminated. This group used the hadith I'm about to quote you as its basis, as one of its main bases. And it is authentic hadith, and it is the hadith in Sahih Muslim. Abu Hurairah narrated that the judgment will not come until a Rum will come out to fight you at a place called A'maq or Dabiq. Now, Dabiq is, and A'maq is close to it, Dabiq is a city in Syria. And the so-called Islamic State took it as its capital. And they intentionally fought to get a small city, a very mid-sized or small-sized city. They wanted to capture that city. Why? Because it's mentioned in this hadith. And we had said a few weeks ago that it is not allowed to do what? Do you remember? I mentioned this very clearly. It is not allowed to do what? Write a screenplay from the hadith. We don't write a Hollywood drama from the hadith. It happens, it will happen. We do not extract a drama and enact it. We've seen what happened throughout history when people have attempted to do that. No, we don't do that. It happens, it will happen. But you don't think you are the one who's going to go do that. We have seen time and time again, people have attempted to do that and it has failed miserably. And one of the most important examples, this is another example of ISIS and Dabiq and whatnot. Another example we mentioned is Juhayman and his takeover of the Kaaba, and he thought he would enact all of the hadith that are mentioned, but he couldn't, because again you have to pick and choose, just like over here. And anyway, so the hadith goes on, that the Romans will come and fight you at a land called Dabiq. And the best of the people of earth from the city of Medina will leave Medina and fight against them. When they are getting ready for war, lining up for war, listen to this, very cryptic. The Romans will say to the Muslims, leave us with the group amongst you who have forsaken their religion. We want to fight them. I'll explain. The Muslims will say, La wallahi, we will never leave our brethren and will never abandon them to you. I'll finish the hadith and then explain. So the battle will rage on. The battle will rage on. 1/3 of the Muslims will retreat out of cowardice, and Allah will never forgive them. When the battle gets tough, they will flee. And the Prophet ﷺ said they will never be forgiven. 1/3 will be killed, and they will be the best of shuhada. They stood their ground, they died martyrs, and they will be the best of shuhada. And 1/3 will conquer, 1/3 will win. And they will not be tested. Maybe the test of the grave, maybe the test of the akhirah. They will not be tested. Allah will bless them and they will not be tested. And they, meaning that 1/3, will then conquer Constantinople. Again, we'll explain this in a while. It's a long hadith. When they will be dividing their ghanima, after they've hanged their swords on the trees to be oiled, then they will hear shaitan cry out that Dajjal has appeared amongst your children. Thinking it to be true, they will march to fight the Dajjal, but they will find it to be a lie, and they will reach Bilad al-Sham, Syria, and when they have lined up to pray Fajr, that is when Isa ibn Maryam will come down after the Dajjal has actually come, and he will then lead the Muslims in war and battle. And when Aduwallah, the Dajjal, sees Isa ibn Maryam, he will melt like salt is dissolved in water. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if he were to be left in that state, he would die, but Isa will kill him, and the people will see the blood of the blood of Dajjal on the weapon of Isa. End hadith. Now, again, this hadith is very, very cryptic. It mentions many things. First and foremost, it also reiterates the previous concept of a massive war between the Romans and the Muslims. Now, in this hadith, it mentions 1/3 only will die, whereas the previous hadith mentions 99% will die. As I said, it appears there will be multiple battles, not just one. And in some of them 99%, and in some of them 1/3. This hadith mentions that this army will conquer Constantinople, whereas the previous hadith does not mention that. So maybe there are multiple wars going on in the world, and the Dajjal's announcement will take place in all of them. Shaitan's gonna frighten the Muslims. Dajjal is here. They're gonna be expecting Dajjal because they're seeing the hadith take place. So Shaitan will use it as a tactic. So maybe multiple groups will run back to Bilad al-Sham, and there they will be with the Mahdi, and the Mahdi will then be leading them in Salah, and Dajjal will actually have come at that point in time, and then Isa will come down as we had mentioned. Another hadith that mentions all of these as well is that the Prophet ﷺ said, the fortress of Muslims on the day of the Malhama, this is where it is mentioned, the Armageddon, the Malhama, will be Ghuta, which is a city near Damashq, one of the best cities in Ash-Sham. This hadith is in Abu Dawood, it is authentic. 3 things are mentioned: Ghuta, Damashq, and Bilad al-Sham. Ghuta is a small city, it is still inhabited to this day, and it is maybe an hour or so outside of Damascus, or I don't know exact timing, but maybe a Syrian brother can tell me, but it's not far from Damascus. When the Prophet ﷺ said this hadith, Damashq, Ghuta, and Bilad al-Sham were the heartland of the Christian Byzantine Empire. This is like somebody saying, oh, Texas, California, these are not lands that belong to Islam. But the Prophet ﷺ predicted that Damashq and Ghuta will be a part of the Ummah. And that when the great Armageddon takes place, I'm translating Malhama as Armageddon. When the great Malhama takes place, the fortress, the base, the camp of the believers will be where? It will be in Ghuta. It will be in the city of Ghuta in Bilad al-Sham. And of course the concept of Bilad al-Sham is mentioned many times in the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, hadith is in Mustadrak al-Hakim, is authentic, when the fitan occur, Iman will be in Bilad al-Sham. When the fitan take place, when the big civil wars, Iman will be in Bilad al-Sham. Now let's pause for a while and look at these hadith and try to extract a series of incidents. What can we extract from all of this? So, first and foremost, realize that Bilad al-Sham doesn't just mean Syria. Bilad al-Sham in classical Arabic, pre-partition, when I say partition, don't think 1947, that's the partition of India, Pakistan and whatnot. I mean pre-partition, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. the Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1917, and then the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, which then enacted it. Before the partition of the Muslim Ummah, before England and France decided to carve up the Ummah and hand gifts out to the victors, and they took up the Ottoman Empire, before that, Bilad al-Sham was essentially what we now call Syria, and of course also Jordan, and of course Palestine, and of course the occupying land that I don't want to mention now. The country that is the occupying regime. So all of this was Bilad al-Sham. Okay? This entire region is called Bilad al-Sham. It's not just modern day Syria. Yes, Damashq is Bilad al-Sham, but Palestine is also Bilad al-Sham. And the cities of Palestine and the cities in the modern occupying state, all of them are Bilad al-Sham. Understand this point. Okay, so realize this. Secondly, it shows that towards the very end of all of these trials, the Muslims will be united and they will be fighting outsiders. They will be fighting non-Muslims. And the people from other lands will come, like Medina. They will come because they know that they have to now fight on the side of the truth. So the fact that even from Medina, people are traveling all the way to be fighting, it shows that they recognize what is going place. It is also very clear that these wars are taking place with the Mahdi being alive. And when the Mahdi is alive, there is no civil war. How can you fight when the Mahdi is on one side, right? So this is a war between the Mahdi and the believers on one side and the unbelievers on the other side. This is a very clear issue. It also shows, as I said, that in all likelihood we're talking about multiple wars. Or maybe, Allah knows best, the Mahdi himself is going region to region. In one battle, 1/3 will die. In another battle, 99% will die. Allah knows best. Again, we don't know. We're just putting all of these together. And the fact that the bird is mentioned shows that this isn't your typical war. That chemical or nuclear or whatever seems very likely in these types of a hadith. Wallahu al-musta'an. Also, what is this cryptic phrase where the Rum are going to say, hand us our brethren? And the Muslims will say, no, they are our brethren. What is all of this? This is very interesting. It appears, and Allah knows best, that there will be a large group of converts from Bilad al-Rum to the land of Islam. And they will be fighting on the side of the Mahdi and the Muslims. And the Bilad al-Rum are going to view them as being traitors. And from their perspective, they're right. From their perspective, they're right. They are traitors. So they will say, first, we want to deal with these guys because they betrayed us and our values. And the Muslims will say, what? They're not your guys, they're our guys. La wallahi, we will never abandon our brethren for you. This hadith is Sahih Muslim. It's really profound, and inshallah it indicates that there will be massive conversion. So much so that the Bilad al-Rum remnants are angry that how come you have those people? They're angry, they're irritated. And this also shows that these hadith are not anti-Semitic or anti-Western. No, it is good versus evil. And you will find people of all ethnicities on the side of good. And you will find people of all ethnicities on the side of evil as well. We talked about this last week. These hadith are not anti-Semitic. There will be righteous people who see the truth and they will be fighting on the side of truth. And that's why the other group will demand we want them back to us. Another hadith, now we move on to other hadith and then again go back. As for the issue of Qistantiniya, we'll come back to it. A very interesting narration goes back to Ibn Hawala, Abdullah ibn Hawala. He has a number of interesting narrations about Judgment Day. Abdullah ibn Hawala, the Prophet ﷺ said, O Ibn Hawala, when you see the Khilafah having been descended to Al-Ard al-Muqaddas, which is Jerusalem, when you see the Khilafah having been descended to Ard al-Muqaddas, then know that the zalazil and the fitan and the balaya are coming. Meaning the great wars and whatnot are going to happen, and that Qiyamah is closer to mankind than my hand is to you or to your head. So his hand was on Ibn Hawala's chest or whatnot. So know that Qiyamah is closer to mankind than my hand is to you. Now, this hadith tells us there shall be a khilafah, but not based in Mecca or Medina, not based in Iraq like the Abbasids, not based in Damashq like the Umayyads, but rather based in Al-Ard al-Muqaddas. إذا نزلت الخلافة بأرض المقدس. Now, in all likelihood, this is the Mahdi. Some have said maybe it's before the Mahdi. I am highly skeptical. There's too many ahadith that mention civil war and fighting and whatnot. And the ummah has never been united since the time of Uthman radiallahu anh and Ali. Do you think it's going to get united again? But we strive for unity. But realistically, it's not going to happen until the Mahdi comes. Also, our Prophet predicted that the Khilafah will come back towards the end of times. ثُمَّ تَكُونُ خِلَافَةً عَلَى مِنْهَاجِ النُّبُوَّةِ Hadith is in Musnad Imam Ahmad. Then there shall be a Khilafah upon the prophetic methodology. In all likelihood, this is, Allah knows whether this ijtihad is correct or not, but in all likelihood, it seems to be none other than the Mahdi himself. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling Ibn Hawala, when the Mahdi comes, judgment is going to come tomorrow. And that's very true. When the Mahdi comes, go to him, be with him, and the judgment is going to be the very next day, basic meaning immediately after that. And that's again very clear.
Experience the beauty of Islam and bring happiness into your life with our app One Islam TV. You will have access to a wide variety of interesting documentaries, inspiring lectures, and so much more. Download One Islam TV from the Apple or Google Play Store today.